In the neck region, we have flexion and extension in the sagittal plane. We have left lateral flexion and right lateral flexion in the frontal plane, and left rotation and right rotation in the transverse plane. These are gliding joints. The trunk plane, we have flexion and extension in the sagittal plane, left lateral flexion and right lateral flexion in the frontal plane, left rotation and right rotation in the transverse plane. These are also gliding joints. The shoulder joint, we have flexion and extension in the sagittal plane, abduction and adduction in the frontal plane, external rotation and internal rotation in the transverse plane, horizontal abduction and horizontal abduction. Then we have circumduction, which is multiplanar, and these are all ball and socket joints. Elbow is a hinge joint, and this is flexion and extension in the sagittal plane. This is forearm pronation and supination in the transverse plane. This is a pivot joint. Now wrist extension and flexion in the sagittal plane. Ulnar deviation and radial deviation. These are condyloid joints. Now finger flexion and extension in the sagittal plane. Finger abduction and adduction in the frontal plane, and these are condyloid and hinge joints. Now with the thumb, this is the saddle joint and it's multiplanar. We have opposition and reposition. Now in the hip, in the ball and socket joint, we have flexion, extension in the sagittal plane. Then we have abduction and adduction in the frontal plane. We have medial rotation, lateral rotation in the transverse plane. And then we have circumduction and multiplanar. Now in the knee, in the sagittal plane, we're doing flexion and extension. This is a hinge joint. For ankle hinge and gliding joints, we have plantar flexion and dorsiflexion in the sagittal plane, inversion and eversion in the frontal plane, and then we have supination and pronation in multiplanar. Toe flexion, toe extension in sagittal plane, toe abduction and adduction in the frontal plane, and these are condyloid and hinge joints. There's scapular elevation and depression. We have scapular protraction and retraction. Now we have mandible depression and elevation, depression, elevation, protraction, retraction, protraction, retraction.